The silence in courtroom 4B wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, like the air before a tornado touches down. Richard sat across the mahogany table, adjusting his cufflinks, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. He thought he had won. He thought the papers Kate was about to sign would strip her of everything, her home, her dignity, and her future. He watched the pen touch the paper, that arrogant smirk widening with every stroke of ink. He was so busy celebrating his victory that he didn't check the judge. He didn't see Judge Harrison's face go pale. And he certainly didn't expect the judge to suddenly shove his chair back, stand up, and lock the courtroom doors. What happened in the next 10 minutes wouldn't just change the divorce, it would rewrite their entire lives. May 14th, 2023, Chicago, Illinois. The air inside the Cook County Courthouse always smelled the same floor wax, stale coffee, and desperation. For Kate Reynolds, it smelled like the end of a 15-year war she hadn't realized she was fighting until it was too late. She sat on the uncomfortable wooden chair, her hands folded in her lap to hide the tremors. She wore a simple navy dress, one she had bought at a discount outlet 3 years ago. Across the aisle, her husband, Richard Reynolds, looked like he had just stepped out of a GQ photo shoot. His charcoal suit was custom-made in Milan, costing more than Kate's current car. He was tapping away on his phone, likely texting Jessica, his 4-year-old executive assistant, about where they would be celebrating dinner that night. Mrs. Reynolds, Judge Harrison Sterling's voice boomed from the bench. He was an older man, known in the circuit for his no-nonsense attitude and his bushy gray eyebrows that seemed to have a life of their own. "We are waiting on you." Kate looked up. "I'm sorry, Your Honor." "Take your time, Kate," her lawyer, Mr. Arthur Penhaligon, whispered. Arthur was 72, wore suits that were slightly too large for his shrinking frame, and carried his files in a battered leather briefcase that looked like it had survived the Carter administration. Richard had laughed when he saw who Kate had hired. "You hired the fossil?" Richard had sneered during the deposition. "Kate, honey, I hired the shark. You're bringing a goldfish to a feeding frenzy." Richard's lawyer, a sharp-featured woman named Evelyn Cross, cleared her throat loudly. "Your Honor, my client has a flight to catch at 3 p.m. for a business conference in Zurich. We have been over the settlement agreement for 6 months. Mrs. Reynolds is simply stalling." "I am not stalling," Kate said, her voice quiet but steady. She looked at the document in front of her. The Mutual Separation and Asset Allocation Agreement. It was a fancy title for a robbery. According to the papers Richard's team had drafted, Kate was entitled to a modest lump sum of $50,000 and the 2018 Honda Civic. In exchange, she waived all rights to alimony, all claims to the marital home in the Gold Coast District, valued at $4.2 million, and most painfully, any stake in Reynolds Tech, the company she had helped build from a garage startup into a logistics empire. Richard claimed the company was near bankruptcy. He claimed the house was leveraged to the hilt. He claimed he was doing her a favor by taking on the debt. Kate picked up the black ballpoint pen. It felt heavy, like a lead weight. She looked across the table. Richard stopped texting and looked up. Then, it happened. The look. It wasn't a smile of relief. It wasn't a look of sadness for the end of a decade-and-a-half relationship. It was a smirk. A cold, predatory curling of the lip that said, "I win. You lose. You are nothing." He gave her a tiny, almost imperceptible nod, urging her on. "Sign it, Kate. Go back to being nobody." The arrogance of it pierced through her fog of depression. For months, he had gaslit her, told her she was crazy, told her she didn't understand finances, told her she was lucky he wasn't leaving her on the street. But that smirk gave it away. You don't smirk when you're taking on millions in debt. You smirk when you're getting away with the heist of the century. Kate lowered the pen to the paper. The scratching sound of the nib against the document was the only sound in the room. S-A-R-A-H. She signed her first name. Richard exhaled, his shoulders dropping. He checked his watch. R-A-E-N-O-L-V-S. She finished the signature. It was done. "Thank you," Evelyn Cross said, instantly reaching out to snatch the papers away, as if afraid Kate might eat them. "We will file this immediately." "One moment," Judge Sterling said. His voice was different now, less bored, sharper. Evelyn froze, her hand hovering over the document. "Your Honor, pass those papers up to the bench," the judge ordered. I need to review the witness attestations on the final page before I stamp the decree. Richard rolled his eyes, loud enough for everyone to hear. We're going to miss the flight, Evelyn. It's just a formality, Mr. Reynolds. Evelyn soothed him, handing the folder to the bailiff, who walked it up to the high bench. Judge Sterling put on his reading glasses. He flipped past the financial disclosures. He flipped past the property waivers. He stopped at the final signature page, the page Kate had just signed, which also contained the signatures of the witnesses who had supposedly verified the prenuptial amendment Richard had produced 3 months ago. The courtroom was silent for 10 seconds, then 20. Richard tapped his foot impatiently. Kate stared at her hands. Then, the judge froze. He leaned in closer to the paper. He took his glasses off, cleaned them on his robe, put them back on, and looked again. Slowly, Judge Sterling raised his head. He didn't look at Kate. He looked directly at Richard. The color drained from the judge's face, replaced by a flush of red anger that started at his collar and moved up. Bailiff, the judge said, his voice terrifyingly calm. Lock the doors. Richard's smirk faltered. Excuse me? I said, lock the doors. Sterling roared, slamming his hand on the desk. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Nobody leaves this room. Not the lawyers, not the plaintiff, and certainly not the defendant. Judge Sterling stood up, towering over the courtroom. He held the document up, his hand shaking with rage. Mr. Reynolds, the judge said, you seem to be in a rush to get to Zurich. I'm afraid you're going to have to cancel that flight, and your dinner plans, and likely your plans for the next 5 to 10 years. To understand why the judge stood up, we have to go back. Not just to the start of the trial, but to the start of the lie. Kate met Richard in 2008 at a coffee shop in downtown Chicago. She was a junior logistics manager for a shipping firm. He was a frantic coder with a laptop and a hole in his sweater. He had spilled a latte on her blouse, and in his frantic apology, he had charmed her. Richard had a vision. He wanted to revolutionize supply chain management using AI, years before AI was a buzzword, but he had no money, no connections, and no organizational skills. Kate had all three. Within 6 months, they were married. Within a year, Kate had quit her stable job, cashed out her $401 cash, and taken out a second mortgage on the condo she had inherited from her grandmother. She poured every cent into Reynolds Tech. For the first 5 years, they were a team. Kate ran the operations, the hiring, the accounting, and the client relations. Richard wrote the code. They ate ramen noodles on the floor of their rented office, laughing about how one day they'd be billionaires. We're partners, Kate, he used to say, kissing her forehead as they fell asleep on the office couch. 50 over 50. Always. You and me against the world. But they never wrote it down. When the company finally took off in 2015, things changed slowly. Richard became the face of the company. Forbes called him a visionary. TechCrunch called him the next logistics king. Kate was just his wife. Richard hired Evelyn Cross as the corporate counsel. Then he hired a CFO. Then he hired Jessica. Kate was slowly pushed out of the boardroom. You deserve a break, babe, Richard had told her in 2018. Go decorate the new house. Plan the galas. Let me handle the stress. You've worked enough. It sounded like love. In reality, it was a tactical maneuver. By 2022, Richard was distant. He was traveling for business 3 weeks a month. The intimate dinners stopped. The conversation died. When Kate asked about the company finances, Richard became defensive. Why do you need to know about the Singapore accounts? He'd snap. Do you not trust me? After everything I've built for us? I've built, not we've built. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning in January 2023. No warning, no discussion. Just a process server at the door while Kate was drinking her morning tea. The grounds were irreconcilable differences, but the real blow was the financial affidavit included in the packet. Richard claimed Reynolds Tech was underwater. He claimed he had lost millions in bad crypto investments. He presented a narrative of a sinking ship. And then, he produced the postnuptial amendment. It was a document dated August 14, 2019. It stated that in the event of a divorce, Kate agreed to cap her settlement at $50,000 to protect the company's liquidity. Kate stared at the document in her lawyer's office a week later. I never signed this, Arthur, she said, her hands shaking. I remember August 2019. We were in the Hamptons. I never signed a post-nup. Arthur Penhaligon adjusted his spectacles, looking at the signature. It looked exactly like Kate's. It's a very good forgery, Kate. Or perhaps you signed a stack of documents without reading them? Richard often had you sign tax forms, didn't he? Yes, but Kate felt sick. He says there were witnesses. Who are they? Arthur pointed to two scrawled signatures at the bottom. According to this, the witnesses were comprehensive notaries provided by his legal firm, a Mr. Thomas J. Clark and a Miss Linda P. Graves. I don't know those people, Kate whispered. We can fight it, Arthur said, though he looked tired. But Richard has endless resources. He will drag this out until you are bankrupt. He's already frozen the joint accounts. How much cash do you have access to? About $4,000, Kate admitted. Forensic accountants cost $20,000 just to start. Arthur sighed. Kate, I believe you. But proving a man like Richard Reynolds is lying. That takes ammunition we simply don't have. So, Kate had surrendered. She accepted the narrative. She accepted that she had been foolish, that she had signed something she shouldn't have, and that the man she loved had simply fallen out of love with her. She didn't know that Richard had made one critical, arrogant mistake. A mistake that was currently sitting in Judge Sterling's hands. 3 days before the court date, Kate had been packing up the house. Richard had graciously given her 7 days to vacate the Gold Coast mansion. She was in Richard's home office, a room she was technically forbidden from entering, looking for a box of old photos. She wanted a picture of her parents. She didn't care about the furniture or the art, she just wanted her memories. She found the photos in the bottom drawer of his mahogany desk. But as she pulled the album out, a thin, red ledger fell from between the pages. It wasn't a digital file. It was an old-school, paper notebook. Richard was paranoid about hackers. He often wrote his most private passwords and keys on paper. Kate opened it. It was filled with gibberish. Alphanumeric strings, D778HK, came in blue lion. She didn't understand it. But on the last page, tucked into the back pocket of the notebook, was a receipt. A receipt for a storage unit in an industrial park on the south side of Chicago, paid for in cash. The name on the rental agreement wasn't Richard Reynolds. It was Vandelay Industries, a joke from the show Seinfeld that Richard loved. Kate's heart raced. She took a photo of the receipt with her phone and put the ledger back. She drove to the storage unit. It was a rundown facility, the kind with flickering lights and no security guard. She used the code written on the receipt, 042908, their wedding date. The gate opened. Inside the unit, there were no stacks of cash or gold bars. There were filing cabinets, dozens of them. Kate spent 4 hours going through them. It wasn't money, it was the bad paperwork, the paper trails of assets he had supposedly sold. The record of the failed crypto investments that weren't failed at all. They had been transferred to a shell company in Malta called Blue Lion Holdings. She found a deed to a villa in Zurich. The same Zurich he was flying to after the court hearing. She took photos. Hundreds of photos. She called Arthur Penhaligon from the car, breathless. Arthur, I found it. I found the money. He didn't lose it. He hid it. Arthur listened, his breathing heavy on the other end. Kate, this is incredible. But we have a problem. What problem? We take this to the judge. We can't, Arthur said sadly. Not yet. If we introduce new evidence now, 48 hours before the final decree, Evelyn Cross will file for a continuance. They will claim you obtained the evidence illegally. You broke into his private office and a storage unit not in your name. They will tie this up in discovery for 2 years. Do you have the money to live for 2 years while we fight this admissibility motion? Kate slumped against the steering wheel. No. If we reveal this now, Arthur explained, Richard will panic. He will move the assets from Malta to somewhere we can never touch, like the Seychelles. By the time the court orders a forensic audit, the money will be ghosts. So he gets away with it? Kate cried. Maybe not, Arthur said. His voice took on a strange, steel-like quality she hadn't heard before. Bring me everything you found. I need to look at the timeline. Specifically, I need to look at the dates on those shell company formations. Kate brought him the evidence. Arthur studied it for a whole day. When he finally looked up, he didn't smile. He looked grim. Kate, Arthur said. Richard was sloppy. But not with the money. He was sloppy with the timeline. He created Blue Lion Holdings 3 days before the postnuptial amendment was signed. So, Arthur said, tapping the table. He transferred the assets before you waived your rights to them. Technically, that's fraud. But to prove it, we need him to commit perjury. We need him to sit in that courtroom, under oath, and tell the judge that he has disclosed everything. We need him to sign the divorce decree that states the financial affidavit is true. You want me to let him win? I want you to let him think he's won, Arthur said. We need to lure him into the trap. We go to court. You act defeated. You sign the papers. Let him sign the papers. Once his signature is on that decree, confirming his fraudulent financial statement, he has committed a felony in front of a superior court judge. But what if the judge just signs it and lets him leave? Kate asked, terrified. If the judge stamps that decree, it's over. I can't appeal a mutual consent decree easily. Arthur smiled, a dry, thin smile. Leave the judge to me. I've known Harrison Sterling for 30 years. He hates 2 things: people who chew gum in his court and liars. We just have to make sure he sees the lie. How? I'm going to slip a specific document into the exhibit pile, Arthur said. It's a gamble. A massive gamble. If Harrison misses it, you lose everything. Kate had looked at Arthur. She thought of the smirk on Richard's face. Do it, she said. And that brought them to this moment. The courtroom locked, the judge standing. But Kate was confused. Arthur had said he would slip in evidence about the money. But Judge Sterling wasn't looking at the financial numbers. He was looking at the witness signatures on the post-nuptial agreement. Why? What had Arthur done? Judge Sterling descended from the bench. His black robes swished around him like the wings of a crow. He walked right up to the plaintiff's table. He slammed the paper down in front of Richard. Mr. Reynolds, the judge hissed. Look at this signature. The witness, Thomas J. Clark. Richard looked confused. Yes? He was a notary. What about it? Mr. Reynolds, the judge said, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. Thomas J. Clark was my brother-in-law. The blood drained from Richard's face so fast he looked like a corpse. He was my brother-in-law, the judge repeated. And do you know why I know this signature is a forgery, Mr. Reynolds? Richard couldn't speak. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Because Thomas died in a car accident in 2017, the judge said. 2 years before this document was supposedly signed in 2019. The courtroom gasped. Even Evelyn Cross looked like she had been slapped. So, the judge continued, leaning in until his nose was inches from Richard's. Unless you have the power to raise the dead to witness your fraudulent post-nup, you have just presented a forged legal document in my court. And you did it to defraud your wife of millions. Judge Sterling stood up straight and turned to the bailiff. Bailiff, handcuffs, now. The silence in the courtroom was shattered by the metallic clack of handcuffs. The bailiff, a burly man named Officer Miller who had spent 20 years watching petty thieves and traffic violators, seemed to take a grim satisfaction in twisting Richard Reynolds' expensive wrists behind his back. You can't do this, Richard shouted, the suave CEO facade cracking like cheap plaster. He twisted in the chair, looking frantically at his lawyer. Evelyn, do something. This is a misunderstanding. It's a clerical error. Evelyn Cross, however, was backing away. She was a shark, yes, but she was a shark who knew when the water was poisoned. She was staring at the document on the judge's bench with a look of pure horror. If she had knowingly submitted a forged document to the court, her career was over. She would be disbarred before sunset. I didn't know, Evelyn stammered, looking up at Judge Sterling. Her face was pale. Your Honor, I swear to you. I received this document from Mr. Reynolds' personal safe. I had no reason to doubt its authenticity. He told me the witnesses were from his previous legal team. You filed it, Miss Cross, Judge Sterling said, his voice trembling with a mix of grief and fury. You are an officer of the court. Due diligence is your job. I am asserting attorney-client privilege regarding the origin of the document for the moment, she said quickly, her survival instinct kicking in, but I am withdrawing as counsel for Mr. Reynolds immediately. You can't withdraw, Richard screamed as Officer Miller hauled him to his feet. I pay you a fortune. Fix this. Mr. Reynolds, Judge Sterling barked, you are being held in contempt of court. Furthermore, I am referring this matter immediately to the district attorney's office for charges of perjury, forgery, and fraud upon the court. And given your ticket to Zurich that departs in 3 hours, I am considering you a massive flight risk. Bail is denied. Kate sat frozen in her chair. Her hands were still resting on the table where, just moments ago, she had been ready to sign away her life. She looked at Arthur Penhaligon. The old lawyer was calmly putting his pens back into his pocket. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look shocked. He looked satisfied. "Arthur," Kate whispered, her voice barely audible over Richard's shouting. "Did you know?" Arthur turned to her, his blue eyes twinkling behind his thick glasses. "Kate, my dear, I've been practicing law in Cook County since 1978. I know every judge, every clerk, and every bailiff. When Richard's team sent over that copy of the post-nup 3 months ago, I recognized the name Thomas J. Clark immediately. But why didn't you tell me? Why didn't we file a motion to dismiss?" "Because," Arthur said, closing his battered briefcase with a soft click, "if we had challenged the signature in a motion, Richard would have claimed it was a mistake. He would have withdrawn the document, drafted a new fake one, or found some other way to cheat you. He would have settled for less, but he would have kept his freedom." Arthur looked at Richard, who was now being dragged toward the side door leading to the holding cells. Richard's eyes locked with Kate's for a split second. The smirk was gone. In its place was a look of pure, unadulterated terror. "I needed him to commit the crime," Arthur whispered. "I needed him to sit in that chair, look the judge in the eye, and swear that the forgery was real. I needed him to trap himself. And I specifically requested a schedule change to ensure we got Judge Sterling. It took a few favors, but it was worth it." Kate looked at the old man in the oversized suit. Richard had called him a fossil. He had no idea that fossils were made of stone. "What happens now?" Kate asked. "Now?" Arthur stood up and offered her his arm. "Now, the divorce is on hold. The criminal trial begins, and we are going to tear Reynolds Tech apart brick by brick until we find every penny he stole from you." As they walked out of the courtroom, Kate felt a strange sensation in her chest. It wasn't happiness, exactly. It was the return of oxygen. For the first time in 2 years, she could breathe. But the nightmare wasn't over. Richard Reynolds was a narcissist and a manipulator. Even in a jail cell, he was dangerous. And as Kate was about to find out, the forged signature was just the tip of the iceberg. 3 days later, the story had broken. The Chicago Tribune ran the headline, "Tech Mogul, Arrested in Courtroom Drama. Judge Catches Dead Man's Signature." Kate sat in Arthur's office, reading the article. It detailed everything: the blocked flight to Zurich, the denied bail, the seizure of Richard's passport. "It gets worse for him," Arthur said, walking in with a stack of files that looked heavy enough to crush a small dog. "The district attorney is having a field day. But that's criminal law. We are interested in the civil side. The money." He dropped the files on the desk. "We got the court order for the forensic audit," Arthur explained. "Since the prenup is proven fraud, the judge has granted us full access to everything. Not just the accounts Richard told us about. Everything." "And?" Kate asked, leaning forward. "And you were right about the storage unit," Arthur said. "But it's bigger than we thought. Richard wasn't just hiding assets. He was leveraging the company to borrow money, then funneling that loan money into offshore accounts. He was effectively bankrupting Reynolds Tech on paper while keeping the cash for himself." Arthur opened a folder. "He has accounts in the Cayman Islands, Malta, and, interestingly, a very large crypto wallet that we just gained access to thanks to the password you found in that red ledger." "How much?" Kate asked. $62 million, Arthur said. Kate gasped. 60. But the company valuation was only 10 million last year. Because he was stripping the value out, Arthur nodded. He was preparing to leave you with a shell. A bankrupt company with massive debts. If you had signed those papers, Kate, the creditors would have come after you for the company debts, while he lived like a king in Zurich. Kate felt sick. It wasn't just greed, it was malice. He wanted to destroy her. "There's something else," Arthur said, his voice dropping. "We found emails, thousands of them. It seems Richard wasn't working alone." Kate's mind raced. "Jessica? Jessica is involved, yes. She was helping him doctor the expense reports. But she's a small fish. We found correspondence with a banker at Credit Suisse and emails to a man named Marcus Vane. Kate frowned. Vane? I know that name. He's a venture capitalist. He tried to buy us out in 2016. Richard hated him. Apparently not, Arthur said. It looks like Vane was helping Richard set up the shell companies. In exchange, Vane was going to buy the bankrupt remains of Reynolds Tech for pennies on the dollar once the divorce was final. They were going to sell your life's work for scrap, and then split the $60 million. Just then, the receptionist buzzed the intercom. Mr. Penhaligon? There's a Miss Jessica Thorne here to see you. She says it's urgent. Kate stiffened. Jessica? Here? Arthur looked at Kate. You don't have to see her. No, Kate said, standing up. Her hands were not shaking today. Let her in. Jessica Thorne looked nothing like the polished, arrogant assistant Kate had seen on Richard's arm at galas. She looked like a wreck. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, she wore no makeup, and her eyes were red and puffy. She wasn't wearing designer clothes, she was wearing a frantic, terrified expression. She stopped when she saw Kate. I didn't know you'd be here. Sit down, Jessica, Arthur said firmly. Jessica sat. She looked at Arthur, then at Kate. Then she burst into tears. He made me do it, she sobbed. He told me he'd fire me. He told me he'd ruin my reputation. I just signed the checks he told me to sign. You're talking about the embezzlement? Arthur asked calmly. I'm talking about everything, Jessica cried. He told me he was going to marry me. He said we were going to Zurich. But, she reached into her purse and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. I found this in his desk the day he was arrested. It's a flight itinerary. Arthur took the paper. He adjusted his glasses. A small, dry chuckle escaped his lips. What is it? Kate asked. It's a ticket to Zurich, Arthur said. One way. For Richard Reynolds. And? Jessica asked, her voice trembling. And? Arthur said, looking at the young woman with pity. There is no ticket for you, Miss Thorne. He was leaving alone. Jessica let out a wail of despair. Kate watched her, feeling a strange mix of pity and validation. Richard used people. He used Kate. He used Jessica. He used everyone until they were empty husks, and then he discarded them. I want to help, Jessica sniffled, wiping her nose. I don't want to go to jail. I'll tell you everything. I know where the hard drives are, the ones he didn't put in the storage unit. Arthur looked at Kate. Kate nodded. We're listening, Kate said. The information Jessica provided was the final nail in the coffin. But it also opened a door to a much darker room. The hard drives, which Jessica had retrieved from a safe deposit box Richard kept under her name, contained the raw data of Reynolds Tech. But they also contained voice memos. Richard, in his arrogance, liked to record his thoughts. He treated them like a captain's log for his genius. Kate sat in her living room. She had moved back into the Gold Coast mansion after the judge granted her temporary exclusive possession, listening to the voice of her husband. Recording date: the 12th of November 2022. Kate is getting suspicious. She asked about the Singapore vendor payments today. I need to accelerate the timeline. Vane says the Zurich setup is ready. I just need to get her to sign the separation agreement. I have to break her spirit first. Make her feel like she's lucky to get the crumbs. Kate paused the recording. She stared out the window at the Chicago skyline. The cruelty was so calculated. It was a game to him. But the next recording was the one that changed everything. Recording date: the 14th of February 2023. Met with Evelyn today. She's nervous about the witness signatures on the post-nup. I told her not to worry. I told her the witnesses were real people. Idiots. I just photoshopped the signature from that old contract with Tom Clark. Who checks signatures from 2019? Besides, Clark is dead. He can't deny it. It was a confession. Clear as day. Kate called Arthur. We have him on tape admitting to the forgery. That guarantees a conviction, Arthur said. But Kate, we have a new problem. What now? Marcus Vane, Arthur said. He knows we have the drives. He knows. Jessica flipped. And unlike Richard, Marcus Vane isn't a white-collar narcissist. He's heavy. What do you mean? I mean, I received a call from his legal team this morning. They are offering a settlement. They want to buy your shares of Reynolds Tech for $20 million. In cash. Immediately. On the condition that we seal the records and stop the investigation into the third-party partners. 20 million? Kate asked. It was a lot of money. It was enough to live comfortably for the rest of her life. It was enough to walk away from the stress, the fear, and the anger. It's a bribe, Kate, Arthur said. They are terrified. If we continue the audit, we won't just find Richard's stolen millions. We might uncover a massive money laundering operation that Vane has been running through your company for years. Kate thought about it. She thought about the last 15 years of her life. The late nights, the ramen noodles, the dreams she and Richard had built before he let the darkness take him. If she took the money, Vane walked free. Richard would still go to jail, but the truth about the company would be buried. What happens if I say no? Kate asked. Then it gets ugly, Arthur warned. Vane will sue you. He will claim you were complicit. He will drag your name through the mud. He has a team of lawyers that makes Evelyn Cross look like a public defender. It will take years to fight. Kate walked to the mirror in the hallway. She looked at herself. She looked tired. She had aged 10 years in the last 10 weeks. But then she remembered the judge. Judge Sterling, standing up for his dead brother-in-law. He hadn't backed down. He had locked the doors. She remembered the look on Richard's face when he realized he wasn't the smartest person in the room. Arthur, Kate said. Yes? Tell Marcus Vane to go to hell. We aren't settling. I was hoping you'd say that, Arthur said, the smile evident in his voice. But Kate, you should know. Richard is requesting a meeting. From jail. He says he wants to talk to you before the plea hearing next week. He wants to manipulate me, Kate said. Likely. Or maybe he realizes Vane is going to throw him under the bus to save himself. Richard might be ready to cut a deal with us. Kate felt a cold shiver. Facing Richard in court was one thing. Facing him in a visitation room, behind glass, with no lawyers. I'll go, Kate said. I need to look him in the eye one last time. I need to know why. The Cook County Department of Corrections is a place where hope goes to die, suffocated by the smell of industrial bleach, unwashed bodies, and stale air. It was a stark contrast to the life Kate Reynolds had lived for the past decade, yet as she walked through the metal detectors, she felt a strange sense of calm. Arthur Penhaligon walked beside her, his briefcase heavy with the final leverage they needed. You don't have to do this, Kate, he said gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. We have the emails, we have the forged signature, we have the testimony from Jessica. You've won. Seeing him now, it's just twisting the knife. No, Arthur, Kate said, her voice steady. He spent 15 years making me feel small. He spent the last 2 years making me feel insane. I need to see him one last time. I need to know who I was actually married to. They were led into the non-contact visitation room. It was a long, sterile hallway divided by booths. On one side, free people sat on metal stools. On the other side, behind thick, scratched plexiglass, sat the inmates. When the guards brought Richard out, Kate's breath hitched. The man who walked toward the glass wasn't the Richard Reynolds who had been featured on the cover of TechCrunch. That Richard wore bespoke Italian suits and checked his Rolex every 5 minutes. That Richard had a gleam in his eye that said he owned the room. This Richard was a ghost. His orange jumpsuit hung loosely on his frame. His hair, usually gelled and coiffed, was greasy and limp. He had dark circles under his eyes that looked like bruises. He sat down heavily, picking up the black phone receiver with a trembling hand. Kate picked up hers. Kate, Richard breathed. His voice was tinny through the receiver, stripped of its usual baritone confidence. Thank God. Thank God you came. I'm here, Richard, she said. You look good, he said, his eyes darting around the room nervously. You look strong. I am strong, Kate replied. I had to be. You made sure of that. Richard licked his dry lips. He leaned in closer to the glass, his eyes pleading. Kate, listen to me. We don't have much time. The plea hearing is in 2 days. You need to talk to Arthur. You need to tell him to take the deal from Marcus Vane. Kate stared at him. Even here, in a cage, he was trying to broker a deal. You want me to take the $20 million? You want me to sell my shares to the man who helped you launder money through our company? It's not about the money, Richard hissed, glancing over his shoulder at the guard. It's about safety. Vane isn't just a businessman, Kate. He has connections. Dangerous ones. If I testify against him, if I expose the Cayman accounts, he won't let me survive in here. I'm a dead man walking if I flip on him. So that's it, Kate said, a cold realization washing over her. You aren't worried about me. You aren't sorry for trying to leave me destitute. You're just scared. I did it for us, Richard cried, the desperation rising in his voice. You don't understand the pressure I was under. Vane said the company was going under. He said we needed the liquidity. I was trying to save Reynolds Tech. I was trying to save our future. Kate felt a flash of anger so hot it almost made her dizzy. Stop lying, she said, her voice cutting through his panic. Just stop. I found the recordings, Richard. I heard you talking to Evelyn. You weren't saving the company. You were stripping it for parts so you could run away to Zurich with your mistress. Richard flinched as if he'd been slapped. And you know what the worst part is? Kate continued, leaning forward until her forehead was almost touching the glass. It wasn't the affair. It wasn't the money. It was the courtroom. Richard stared at her, confused. The courtroom? The day I was signing the papers, Kate said. I looked up at you. I was about to sign away my life's work. I was about to lose everything. And you smirked. Richard went still. You had a little smile on your face, she whispered. That smirk didn't say, I'm doing this to save us. That smirk said, I won. It said you thought I was stupid. It said you thought you were untouchable. Kate, please. Tears began to leak from Richard's eyes. I'm begging you. If you don't take the settlement, they'll put me away for 10 years. I can't do 10 years. I'll die in here. Kate looked at the man she had vowed to love until death do them part. She remembered the coffee shop where they met. She remembered the late nights packing boxes. She remembered the love she thought was real. But she also remembered the smirk. I'm not taking the settlement, Richard, Kate said, standing up. Arthur is handing the hard drives to the FBI this afternoon. We aren't burying the truth to save your skin. You made your bed. Now you have to sleep in it. Kate! No. Richard slammed his fist against the glass. You can't do this to me. I made you. You're nothing without me. Kate hung up the phone. She watched as the guards grabbed Richard by the shoulders. He was screaming now, his face contorted in rage and fear, the mask finally gone, revealing the terrified narcissist beneath. She turned and walked out of the room. She didn't look back. 6 months later, the federal courthouse in downtown Chicago was packed to capacity. The trial of the people versus Richard Reynolds and Marcus Vane had dominated the headlines for weeks. It had everything. High-stakes finance, a dead witness, and a betrayal that felt Shakespearean. Kate sat in the front row, Arthur by her side. Arthur had officially retired from active litigation the week before, but he had come back for this one day. All rise, the bailiff bellowed. Judge Harrison Sterling entered. He looked older than he had on the day of the divorce hearing, but his gait was strong. He took his seat and adjusted his glasses, looking down at the defense table. Richard Reynolds stood there. He looked smaller than ever. Beside him, his lawyer, a public defender, since Evelyn Cross had been disbarred and was facing her own charges, looked resigned. Mr. Reynolds, Judge Sterling began, his voice echoing in the silent courtroom. You have entered a plea of guilty to 3 counts of wire fraud, 1 count of aggravated identity theft, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit money laundering. Richard nodded, staring at the floor. Yes, Your Honor. This court sees many fraudsters, Judge Sterling said, taking off his glasses. We see greed every day. But your case is unique in its cruelty. You didn't just steal money. You attempted to use this very court as a weapon to destroy your wife. You forged a document to rob her of her livelihood. The judge paused, his eyes narrowing. And you forged the signature of Thomas J. Clark. You used the name of a good man, my brother-in-law, who could not speak for himself because he had passed away. You desecrated his memory for a bank account. Richard flinched. The prosecution has recommended a sentence of 6 years, Judge Sterling said. However, given the malicious intent and the sophisticated nature of the fraud, I am exercising my discretion to depart upward from the guidelines. The courtroom held its breath. Richard Reynolds, I hereby sentence you to serve 108 months, 9 years in a federal correctional institution. Following your release, you will serve 5 years of supervised probation. You are also ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $12.4 million to the victim, Kate Reynolds. A gasp went through the gallery. Richard's knees buckled, and his attorney had to catch him to keep him from hitting the floor. Furthermore, the judge continued, turning his gaze to Kate, regarding the civil matter of the company ownership. Since the funds used to manipulate the stock price were illicitly obtained, and since the prenuptial agreement has been voided as fraudulent, the court awards 100% of the controlling interest in Reynolds Tech, along with all seized assets from the offshore accounts, to Mrs. Kate Reynolds. Judge Sterling looked at Kate. For a brief moment, the stern mask slipped, and he offered her a nod of respect. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said, "you may have lost a husband, but you have regained your life. Do not squander it." "I won't, Your Honor," she whispered. 1 year later, the Chicago skyline was gray and rainy, but inside the offices on the 40th floor, everything was bright. The dark mahogany walls that Richard had loved were gone, replaced by cream-colored paint and modern art. The heavy, oppressive curtains had been pulled back to let the light flood in. Kate sat at the head of the conference table. She wore a tailored white blazer, her hair cut in a sharp, professional bob. "Okay," she said, looking around the table. "Let's look at the Q3 projections." To her right sat Jessica Thorne. The young woman had served her time 3 months of house arrest and 500 hours of community service. Kate had visited her, seen the genuine remorse, and offered her a lifeline. Jessica started in the mailroom of the new company. Now, she was the head of client relations. She worked harder than anyone, driven by a need to prove she was more than the mistakes she had made. "Projections are up 15%, Jessica said, smiling. "The rebranding to Phoenix Logistics has been received incredibly well. The market trusts us again." "Good," Kate said. The door opened, and an older man walked in, leaning on a cane. It was Arthur. He wasn't on the payroll, but he came by every Tuesday for lunch. "Sorry I'm late," Arthur grumbled good-naturedly. "Traffic on Wacker Drive is a nightmare." "You're right on time, Arthur," Kate smiled. After the meeting, Kate stood by the window, looking out at the city. She thought about Richard. He was currently in a medium-security prison in Terre Haute. She heard he was working in the library. She didn't hate him anymore. Hate took too much energy. She just pitied him. He had chased the world and lost his soul. She looked at her reflection in the glass. She saw the lines around her eyes, scars from the stress, from the tears, from the sleepless nights. But she also saw something else. She saw a woman who had walked through fire and come out made of steel. Arthur walked up beside her. "What are you thinking about?" "I was thinking about signatures," Kate said softly. "How a pen stroke can change your life." "Indeed," Arthur said. "But it wasn't the signature that saved you, Kate. It was the fact that you refused to accept the lie. Most people would have signed the papers and walked away. You fought." Kate turned to him. She didn't smirk. She smiled a genuine, warm, radiant smile that reached her eyes. "I didn't fight alone," she said. "Well," Arthur checked his watch. "I believe lunch is on the CEO today?" "Absolutely," Kate laughed. "Come on, I know a place that makes excellent ramen, for old time's sake." They walked out of the office together, leaving the ghosts of the past behind them. The name on the door said Phoenix Logistics, but the spirit inside was all Kate. She had signed her divorce papers in tears, but she was signing her future in bold, permanent ink. The story of Kate and Richard is more than just a legal drama. It is a testament to the power of intuition and the fatal flaw of arrogance. Richard Reynolds believed he was the main character of reality, that he could rewrite history, forge signatures, and discard people like used tissues because he was smarter than them. But his downfall came from the very people he underestimated. A trophy wife who knew how to dig for truth, a fossil lawyer who knew the judge's family tree, and an assistant he treated as disposable. It serves as a stark reminder that in the court of life, character is the only currency that matters. When the judge stood up, he wasn't just enforcing the law, he was enforcing a universal truth. You cannot build a kingdom on a foundation of lies. And that is the incredible conclusion to the story of the smirk that cost a man millions. I honestly got chills when Kate confronted him in the jail cell. It's so satisfying to see someone who was bullied finally take their power back. If you enjoyed this deep dive into justice, please smash that like button. It helps us create more long-form stories like this. Do you think Kate was right to hire Jessica back after she helped Richard? Or would you have cut ties with everyone involved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and always read the fine print.